Yo everyone, welcome to episode 40 of DoubleDM. I mean, 40 episodes is a lot, and actually a number that when we first started out wasn't really on our screens that we would ever be able to reach it. I mean, it's insane. Nearly a full year already. It's currently Sunday morning and I'm exhausted from this past week, so I'm gonna make this quick. Why Your World Matters will release on Wednesday the 10th of November for you to listen to once again. Second, if you wish to book ad slots on this show, just message us on Twitter. And last but certainly not least, leave us a nice 5-star review or something so we can get the word out to more people. Love you all, have a fun episode. What's good, everyone? Hello, welcome back to DoubleDM podcast, where I, Emil, and my co-host Niels talk about TTRPG related topics and theories and whatnot all, ask questions, make you think more about what you actually think about these games, and yeah.
And everything in between, because chaos.
Yeah, we also throw in something else sometimes. Discussions about bread.
Yeah, oh boy, yeah, I remember that one. The bread discussion was pretty long ago, actually, I think. Or at least it feels like it.
Yeah, it was.
But it was an amazing journey from there.
Yeah.
So, how are you today? Everything good?
No, it's a rainy day outside, right?
Yeah.
It's
weather is shit.
Weather is shit. I'm sitting here looking outside the window. Autumn has arrived, right? It's finally cold outside. It's cold. It's wet.
It's nearing Christmas. Yay!
2 months.
Yeah, the stress is already coming in at work. Already, I mean,
after Halloween, it instantly starts, right? After Halloween,
it starts before. We get all the wares for Christmas.
Yeah, but I mean for the people itself, right?
Yeah.
Right, for buyers, and right after Halloween, first day of November, basically Christmas extra shopping or Christmas planning begins. Basically, for most
it's just
people.
Pandemonium out there right now. Some days, especially Fridays and Saturdays, it's just yeah. And I'm in the middle of it. Woo! But one good thing that comes with Christmas times is always the mulled wine stands in all the shopping streets. So you can eat some roasted almonds or drink some mulled wine or both. So it relieves some of the tension that is going on in all these streets. So yeah, it has its ups and downs.
Yeah. I mean, the one stall in front of one of the shopping centers here never left. They've been there for basically the whole year.
Yeah, this round hollow cake thing, right?
No. There is a simple wooden one right outside the boulevard.
Yeah.
That one never left. That one still stands from last year. I know that because on my birthday, 2 friends of mine and I may have gotten us some wine there.
Nice.
Which is, well, normally you only get this mulled wine in November till like February or something. We got it in June, and it was amazing.
I would be down for that.
I mean, the stall is open. We can get one.
Yeah, it is a time. Let's just say it is a time.
Time has begun, right? Like it's a thing, right? I've already seen some people put on Christmas hats.
Oh no! Oh no!
And you know what's most important? It has already started again.
Oh yeah! Oh no!
It has started. It has started.
Oh no!
I am very happy that it's not started yet in most shops, like in supermarkets or wherever.
Yeah,
they still haven't started it. But like, I don't know, but 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then we definitely have Christmas music playing all over the city.
Yeah, usually, or at least in my shop, I think this year it is the last week in November.
It is.
So from there on, it will just be Christmas carols and songs, and all the things we always hear every year.
I mean, the thing is, there are so many Christmas songs, but only like 20 get played every year because those are the only ones that people really care about.
Yeah, and I mean, there are so many good ones out there.
Yeah, but nobody listens to those. It's all Last Christmas I gave you my heart. On the very next day, you gave it away. right? In the beginning, it's fun because it's a catchy song, but after like listening to it for 5 days a week,
it just nope. Or another classic would be "All I Want for Christmas" from Mariah Carey.
Yeah, obviously.
Also, I mean, it's a great song, but after 1 week of perma listening to it, it's not.
It's not.
Yeah, I mean, you can say it's a good song, but after some time, it just isn't.
Yeah, I know. I know the feeling. So,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, please.
I just wanted to add something to that real quick. I'm just glad that at my store, we play Thank God It's Christmas from Queen from time to time to change it up a bit.
To change it up a bit.
From the other two songs. So those two classics, some bad covers, and then from time to time, Thank God It's Christmas. So yeah. Oh, I'm excited. Yeah.
The time has begun. The time has begun, people. And
brace yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So, did anything TTRPG related happen to you since we last spoke, which was last week this time?
I had a short Halloween one-shot on Halloween directly. We played a little mystery kind of thing, like Resident Evil Village vibe-ish. We were trapped in a mansion and needed to escape. And it was mostly calm, but there was always this lingering fear of the big bad, which we haven't seen yet, come out any second.
So you will have to play again?
Yep.
I also had a Halloween session. I told you about the mystery and all that stuff, right? My players didn't finish it yet. Since it's part of our actual campaign, I didn't feel the need. I need to push them to finish it in the session. This campaign was basically dealing with very mundane tasks. Bandits, raiding villages, saving captured villagers, defending a village against gnolls. So very mundane. But then they were introduced into these ghost demon type things, which basically are a complete switch from what it is. And I used this session to change the tone of the campaign, obviously with consent of my players, right? To actually make a good new tone switch for that campaign, to switch a bit more to, you could say, a little darker tone, a little more mystery and horror-y tone with what we spoke about with Sergio last week about, which worked really well. They've basically been outsmarted by the game all the time, and I don't mean that they felt outsmarted and bad about it, because that's not what you want, but basically the first person went missing, and they already made a lot of theories. Okay, was he kidnapped? By whom? Was he this? Was that? And with all the clues, it was pretty obvious when you put all of them together into one place. It was pretty obvious that he either was snagged by a demon or by a creature summoned, or he transformed. And then the next day someone else went missing. And that only strengthened that theory that he actually became possessed and transformed into a demon. But then there were some other irregularities. Why did this person do this for that demon? And every time someone went missing from the 4 people that went missing so far, it always changed. It never was something that could be predicted by what came before. So they didn't knew that this that they've met 4 people basically. A detective, a demonologist, an arcanist, and an alchemist. The alchemist went missing. Next day, the arcanist went missing. The day after that, the demonologist went missing. And then the inspector went missing, or the detective went missing. The alchemist went missing by basically transforming into a demon and escaping his room. The arcanist went missing by that same demon breaking into his office, and then the arcanist just walking out of there with him without any struggle or anything. So that was an irregularity for my players. Why did he do that? Maybe he was possessed as well, is what they then figured out. Then they knew someone broke into the arcane vault, and there they found other clues. And then the demonologist went missing again in a different way. But basically, what all these ways have in common is people change their behavior all of a sudden, but they keep certain things. For example, what the demonologist teleported out of his room, and that wasn't like this Deus Ex Machina moment that because my players were camped outside of his room, because they weren't. But basically, this demonologist just teleported out of there, and I wanted to basically tell my players with that these possessed ghosts still possess the abilities of the possessed. This demonologist still can cast spells, even high level spells like a dimension door with or teleport or anything with that. He can basically flee out of an arcane vault.
Yeah.
So yeah. And now they've just noticed that the inspector, the fourth person in the mix, went missing, and that this night is a full chaos moon, which basically means this is the time for resurrection. This is the day for rituals and cultists and whatnot all. And they now have to find out what is being summoned, where it is being summoned, and how to stop it. Very interesting. But that's to figure out for them at the start of the next session, which then will probably lead into them discovering more about these demon ghosts and then following that lead, I would guess.
That sounds like a fun one.
Yeah,
like a fun story thread to follow.
Does.
I bet the session was amazing fun to play.
Yeah, it was.
As a DM and as a player, it sounds really, really good.
It was also great because we played in person, and it was great seeing my friends face to face again. And yeah, it was just a great experience. At the end, I noticed that all 5 of us, were a little bit worn out by this longer session because we haven't done it in so long. But yeah, we had pizza delivered, which already is a highlight for us.
Yeah.
Having a good pizza. We had good fun. We had a lot of jokes. We had a lot of moments where good character roleplay came into play, where they really went deeper into that character, which I attribute to them being able to see each other and communicate freely with each other. Because one of the things that, for example, at my table happens quite often is when I have a solo scene with one of my players. They are basically having a dialogue with some other NPC, and the rest isn't there. Those players don't sit on their phones and browse Twitter or something. They actually have conversations of their own. Small flavor conversations between player characters. So Paladin and the Rogue had a little bit talk about their goals. Why are they even here? Why are they doing this? Right? And then when that dialogue was finished, I asked the two, okay, what was your talk about? You could say that everyone at the table should be able to listen into that talk, yes, but I like it when they actually engage in something, because that NPC talk with that one player, that was also only fluff, so they can have their own fluff discussion. That doesn't work online. And that adds a lot to the immersion for me, because I don't need to hear their conversation, but I can ask after that what they both gathered from that conversation, and it was great. And I love that, because that is something I definitely missed, that my players actually get to play their character face to face with another character.
Yeah, and I think online TTRPG has a lot of benefits to it, but playing in person just hits different sometimes.
Yeah.
Because you are with a group of friends where you're comfortable with. It's just the setting you're used to in TTRPG most of the time. So you just naturally feel a little more or a little less stressed, to say.
Yeah.
And that's one reason maybe why the session lengths stretch out a bit, because you want to savor every moment of it, or every moment you have, which then can lead to longer sessions, which lead to worn out.
Well, no, we planned for exactly 8-hour sessions, and we basically played exactly 8-hour session.
Okay, yeah.
But we weren't used to 8-hour sessions. That's the problem.
Okay. Yeah, but playing in person, that's great.
It's a different experience, in my opinion, from online. But it's not to say that one of the two is bad. I like playing online for different reasons, and I like playing in person. I just think that the in-person reasons outweigh the online reasons for me. I like playing in person more, but I definitely never will shy away from playing online.
Exactly this. There are benefits to both, and for me as well, I like playing in person a bit more than online, but not to say that online is bad. Not at all. It's also a great way to.
So I think we should go into our discussion for today. After a word from our sponsors, we will talk about failing in games. Yeah, stay tuned, people.
Hello, everyone. I am Oliver Redboots. I am one of the co-hosts of RodInFlagons. And would you like to not die? Is not dying out there adventuring around the realms kind of on your higher priority list?
Not dying is underrated. I don't know if you've tried it. I imagine you have tried it, but not dying is good.
10 of 10 would recommend.
Yes.
So if not dying is on your radar, and you would also like to adventure, and you'd like to maybe learn a thing or two about the adventuring lifestyle, where to go,
How to stay alive,
learn about monsters,
learn how not to die,
find out other funny ways that adventurers have died,
while still staying alive,
learn what is valuable loot and what is not valuable loot,
that you can use while you're alive.
and all sorts of other things, come on and over and listen to RodInFlagons. We'll do our best to make sure that you hit the road well prepared to, well, what Swan said.
To not die.
So listen to us every week, RodInFlagons, everywhere you get your rodcasts. Thank you very much.
As a reminder, don't die.
The Contract is a tabletop role-playing game about ambitious people who go on deadly missions for fantastic powers. With a focus on outside-the-box problem-solving, rotating game masters and self-contained missions, The Contract is like Game Master Bootcamp. Hop on their Discord server anytime and GM for players who are ready to risk the lives of their beloved characters. The Contract is available 100% for free online at TTRPG.com. Drop-in friendly, no-commitment sessions are run daily in their Discord server.
And with that, welcome back to the episode. Today we are talking about failure. So, Emil.
Yeah.
What would you define as our topic failure?
Okay.
I mean,
well,
player failure, character failure, DM failure. What do we mean by that?
Well, failure is normally the uncompletion of a task.
Mm-hmm.
Failing is just not succeeding
Mm-hmm.
in a basic definition, but it is a lot more than that, I would say.
Yeah. It's not just black and white.
When you have a task, right, you can either succeed on that task or fail that task. But there is a lot of degrees of success, degrees of failure, and what those then mean, right? There are certain degrees of it, right? I can fail a task by not doing the task. I can fail a task by doing it wrong. I can fail a task by, for example, doing the task and doing it right, but just not in time.
Mm-hmm.
That's also a type of failure. There's a lot to the word failure, and all of those, there's a lot to it to TTRPGs as well. It's not just, for example, from my perspective of a system developer or programmer standpoint. It's not just from an engineer standpoint. It's really, failure means a lot, and it's a big topic. And that's something that really needs to be clear, that failure is so big that, as always, we in this episode probably can't touch on everything, and there will be always someone having something new to say to this discussion.
Yeah, but that's one reason why we do this podcast.
Yeah.
To inspire discussion about certain topics.
Inspire critical thinking.
Exactly. And I mean, you can even link success and failure sometimes. This is also a possibility you have. For example, in a TTRPG setting, if you want to pick a lock, you may pick the lock, but it is unusable after that. You can't relock the door, for example. That would be one example.
That's a mixed success.
Exactly. You have success, but fail at something else.
Task. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's way too nuanced to really cover everything, and I think that's really important. Failure is always nuanced. There's always the type of failure you have, how severe that failure actually is, what the outcomes are, and I think when I'm saying that, the most important part about failure is not the fact that you failed at something, but what that means. The outcome and the implications of that outcome are way more important than the actual failure itself already.
So let's talk about the groups of people, let's say, that can make or have failures.
Everyone.
GMs, of course, everyone. But I wanted to cluster it a bit for our TTRPG settings. For example, the GM can make mistakes, the players can make mistakes, the characters can make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So which one of the three would you like to talk about first?
First of all, I wanted to say something else.
Okay.
You said mistakes right now. Is that the same as failing? What is a mistake? What is a failure?
Yeah, it isn't entirely the same, but it isn't entirely different either. I think a mistake is a failure, but not every failure is a mistake. if you want to say it like that. Because you can...
Okay, I have found a definition online
Okay.
for mistake versus failure. And I want to read it to you, and we can talk about it in a TTRPG sense. A mistake is an incorrect, unwise, or unfortunate act or decision. A mistake can be caused by bad judgment, a lack of information, or a lack of attention to detail. While a mistake can lead to failure, they don't always have to end in failure. We make numerous mistakes every day without serious consequences. We would prefer to avoid making mistakes, but without perfect attention and perfect prediction, they are inevitable. Conversely, a failure doesn't always have to stem from a mistake. So what that means is a mistake is an act or decision you make that then can lead to a state of failure. A mistake is, so in a TTRPG setting, a rogue wanting to pick a lock. And he picks a lock, and that decision of, yes, I picked the lock was unwise or incorrect, and that's a mistake. So a mistake is always something we do, and the consequences of that is the failure.
Yeah.
So you make a mistake, you pick the lock, and the lock isn't able to close anymore, so you failed at closing the door,
or you failed at not destroying the lock, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you mean, I mean, you succeeded on your task to open the door.
I mean, the thing is, for me, a mistake is like an error, either consciously or subconsciously or whatever that we do, while failure is not meeting a certain objective, right? So in the lock picking example, the rogue picks the lock and makes the mistake of, in the story, he makes the mistake of making it too fast. That can then be he didn't roll high enough, right?
Yeah.
And failure, if the desirable objective of that rogue was to pick the lock and then be able to close it later, then he would have failed at that objective. But if its objective was to just open the door without any other reason behind it, then he actually succeeded and didn't fail. But he made a mistake because the door isn't closable anymore. So that's a distinction. Mistakes are just errors that happen, while failure is a task you actually wanted to achieve not being met. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have the definition of that down.
Yeah.
Now we can talk about what it means to fail for certain groups, right? That's what you wanted to actually talk about.
Or it is one option we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, let's go that route, please. Again, the question was the certain different groups in the TTRPG setting, how they can fail or make mistakes, right?
Exactly.
So we have the three groups that you talked about. We have the GMs, we have the players, and we have the player characters. Or we could just say characters, because then we also have the NPCs in there.
Exactly.
We already talked about GM failure and GM mistakes, or at least how to deal with them. But the most important part that we've also said about in that episode, but also want to iterate on this again, is that failing is okay for GMs. It happens to everyone.
It is part of the experience sometimes.
Yeah, you learn from them, and you need to... The only thing that's really important about mistakes or failures in this instance, because we can use this term synonymously in this case, that you identify when you made them, that you own up to them. That's the only important part about it.
Yeah.
Being ready to say, that's my bad, apologize to your players, and then try to fix it in any way, shape, or form. Try it by playing the game, like trying to move forward, try to retcon something with consent of your players, right? Talk to them about it and all that stuff. That's all ways to fix it, but that's what we talked about already. And now that also extends to players, especially. It's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to feel like you've made a mistake. Most of the time, and this goes again for both groups, you didn't even make one. It just feels like one, right? It's very hard to actually fail at a TTRPG table, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, if you're toxic as hell.
Yeah, if you're a social asshole.
Yeah, then maybe you're not in the right space.
Yeah, they are social games, right? And that's the important critical part of it. We play as a group of friends or as a group of people just to have fun. As long as everyone at the table is having fun, there can't be any failure involved. There might be certain mistakes, right? That's the thing. We have the objective of having fun. As long as everyone's having fun, there can't be any failure. But for example, someone might make a mistake of, I don't know, stealing the spotlight of a character once, of someone else once, right? They interrupt them or something. That's just a simple mistake. That can be very easily remedied by saying, I apologize, sorry, I read the room wrong, and everyone can move on, right? That's not a failure. That's a simple mishap.
Yeah, the goal was still met. The objective was achieved. To have fun. So everything's fine. Just made smaller mistakes along the way. It happens. It belongs to the experience. So, anyways.
Yeah.
And regarding it being social games, yeah, if you're not socially acceptable or in your behavior,
or for that table, right? There might be a table for you, but if you're at my table, I really don't have many rules for the table, but one rule that is don't be a dick. And that dick definition is defined by everyone at the table. And if the majority agrees that you are not healthy for a table, you're gone.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you're not healthy for any table. It just means for this specific table. So there's everything there you can imagine in the TTRPG universe. So if you're not a right fit for one table, it doesn't mean you're not the right fit for every table. So there will somewhere be a place for you anyway. So just keep that in mind.
Be searching for the perfect table for you, because you never know until you have found it that you have found it, right?
Exactly.
At some point you will feel at home at the table, and that's the most important part. That's where you feel good. That's where you have the most fun. And that might change throughout the years. When you play with a table for 6 years, everybody changes in that 6 years of time. Maybe the table changed that you don't enjoy it anymore. Then you go searching again. Really? And maybe that's actually, right? That's a failure. If you decide to stay with a table that's not that's not the right table for you. If you're staying at the table where you don't have fun, you didn't meet the objective. You lost at having fun. That means more or less you lost at D&D or at any other TTRPG for that matter, obviously.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the only failure you can really do is not doing the right thing for you and finding the perfect table for you. And maybe you never find the perfect table. Maybe there are always smaller things that you don't like slight inconveniences. That's still okay in big quotation marks. Find the table where you feel the best. And that's your table. And that's the table where you won't where you won't fail at the objective of having fun. Don't stay at tables where you don't have fun. And this goes out to anyone. I am sure that there are people out there that wouldn't have fun at my tables. Then don't play with me, right? That's not an issue, right?
Yeah,
we are here to have fun. Everyone's here to have fun. And if you don't have fun at my table, I totally understand you not coming to my table. I totally understand you saying to me, hey, I tried this for like 2 sessions, it didn't work, I might be going. Then you actually spare me, you, and everyone else the pain of when you stay there and the game gets miserable through us not being able to work together to create a fun experience for everyone.
Exactly.
Right? It's not your fault. It's not mine. It's not the table's fault. It's just a simple thing that happens. You're not fit for every table and you need to accept that. Not accepting that could be met as a failure.
Exactly. So we said that there is no real form of failure for DMs or GMs and players, except for the not having fun part. But let's talk about a little more about the failure for characters, because I think this would make the most sense, because this is the most or the biggest part of failure in any type of game. Because you can still have fun as a player while your character fails.
Yeah. I always say that there's a disconnect between player and character. We said it in the horror episode because that's basically the barrier that protects the players from getting hurt, like the characters do. That there's always this disconnect, and that's what you need to realize, that when your character fails at a task or makes the wrong desirable outcome, that's not on you as a player. That there needs to be this barrier that's a decision your character took, that you took, right? You made the decision to take that action for the character, but you took the action informed on what the character knows and how the character feels and what the character would do. Generally, making the decision your character would make and that decision then failing is not a failure on your part or on the GM's part. It just isn't the right decision for that. It just wasn't the right decision for the situation. But the character would have made that decision. So actually, you didn't fail, but you actually succeeded at playing the character in that situation.
Exactly.
So every character failure is actually, most of the time, right? We can't talk in full absolutes here, but actually it's always a success on the player side, in my opinion, because then you played your character right. And even if you know the decision you should take is option A, but you take option B because that's what your character would do, that's a big success, because we are here to play a character. We are here to have fun playing characters, not to make the perfect decisions. That's why your characters are not you in a fantasy world, right?
Yeah. Or at least most of the time.
That's definitely one important part that I see. Most of the time a character fails, it's actually a player succeeding. It's succeeding at playing that character in an interesting way to create awesome opportunities, because failures and mistakes in game create so many awesome story opportunities.
Oh yeah. I mean, it could be just a character falling off a cliff. If the objective was to stay on that ledge, a failure, but it leads to awesome options for the other player characters to help or to further the story, or there are so many things that can spring from failure, because failure shouldn't be a hard stop on the whole campaign or the session or anything. It should be a tool everyone at the table can use to further the story.
Yeah, 100%. Right? When a character fails, and let's take an example, let's not take the rogue example, but let's take just a simple example. Your character is a barbarian that's signing up for underground fighting rings and fails at the combat there. And now begins a certain special arc for that character to train. To beat this opponent, to get into like the Pokemon League, right? Like to be one of the champions again. And that creates a way new set of opportunities and stories. And I think it's important for players to realize that they are in failure of character lies the opportunity to play that character. If the character fails, you have the opportunity to react to that failure and discover even a new side of that character. Maybe that barbarian has never lost a fight before in his hometown where the gladiator rings are just as much, and then he gets to a town where it's more brutal and more dangerous and harder to win, and he loses. That's a big hit to that person's ego, for example. And then playing out that barbarian losing his ego, being needed to be built up again, right? And that's an opportunity for other players to jump in, to find a way to interact with that character in a new light. Right?
It just makes a character for everyone involved. Not just the barbarian who failed the combat or the fight ring, but every other character portrayed by one of the players, because they can play the character as if they were giving some emotional support or physical support. Maybe the monk helps the barbarian train, or whatever might be the reason. Or definitely. Even though he failed, the bard could write a song about his heroic fight anyways, which might boost his confidence again, and stuff like that. There's so much opportunity in this.
And I mean, that's just a simple example. Now, remember that this was what we just said is basically the most simple example we could think of. The game is way more complex than that when you play it. So there is so much that you can, as a player, basically see and realize and work off of failure in the game. If a character fails at something, everyone gets a piece of the cake of being able to play off of that. Maybe a rogue that's very snarky and edgy, then insults the barbarian, or basically always says, well, you're weak, you didn't win the fighting, or whatever, right? That's something to play out a character. But
might change his personality a bit to be more firm with, or more soft with the barbarian, to say, hey, it happens to everyone, don't beat yourself up about it.
Exactly. There's like, we can talk about this certain example for like 20 minutes more, or even more than that. And that shows that you really have the opportunity when a character in the game fails, and that can even be an NPC, a player character, or whatever, to really play and use that. And when I, as the DM, see my players using failures to further the game's fun, to further the game's story, to further everything in the game, that's really lightening up my mood, because handling failures, handling mistakes is something that is inherently painful to us humans. right? If you feel bad when you make a mistake, when you fail at a certain task, and that's human. That's everyone is a little bit sad and hurt after that. Same goes for the characters and since we are disconnected from them and are not hurt in the ideal case, we are not hurt by the failure of our characters, we can play that out. We can go into that. We can immerse ourselves in that character that has just failed and is now feeling bad to play that character, right? There's a disconnect between your player character and yourself, and that disconnect is a barrier that you can, however, reach through and reach your character and play that character. And even, right, the player character can reflect on you.
Yeah.
I know people that have created characters that help them work through certain things in their life, that help them develop new personality traits that they wanted to have. And yeah, that TTRPGs can do that.
Yeah.
But there is still a barrier between you and your character. And I think it's healthy to actually have that barrier.
Yeah.
It's a soft barrier, but it should be there because it protects
Definitely.
you from the failure of last episode, from the horror, for example. It protects you from everything that is in the game that you don't want to deal with, more or less.
Yeah.
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 Well, when it comes to failure in the game, especially in a story, right? Failure is a very cool thing to talk about in a story. It's a very cool thing to play out, like we said. But there is a difference if, for example, there you have a single point of failure, in my opinion. There is very much, if you condense a TTRPG story or every story to certain points in the story that are important, decisions, combats, whatever you else want to have. But I think you can basically condense everything to those certain points that then basically build a tree from the beginning to an end, or a path. And that's the path your players take, right? That's why I say it's a tree. You start at a certain point and then you can take every branch you want, but they take one. And that's then the next starting point for the next decision and all of that stuff. And there's a lot of fluff in between, which is why it isn't as linear as a path would be. It's not linear, but there is still, when you look back on your story, you can basically break it to certain points where the story was shaped and certain points where it wasn't. And what I want to say with that is, if one of these points is the single point of failure, basically meaning that that point decides make or break of if everything goes according to plan, or your players basically fail completely. And that's saying the players, not the characters. Players fail completely at the game. Then that's a problem. There's no problem in, for example, having a combat and becoming a TPK, because then it's a player character failure and they fail to beat this monster. And yeah, then the campaign is over, or you start somewhere else again, or whatever, right? But that's not a single point of failure, right? Every combat should not be outcome determined, right? There should be always a possibility for TPK. Yeah. Even how slim it is. That's not Definitely. What I'm not saying that you shouldn't have combats that are deadly. Combats are not single point of failures. But for example, a single dice roll is a very important thing, because if a single dice roll is a single point of failure, for example, in D&D, we only have a binary pass or fail system. There is no degrees of success or failure in D&D normally. You have a problem if one dice roll decides the entire game.
Yeah, that's not good. You should avoid that.
Yeah, it's a failure, and if that fails, well, what you're gonna do? What are you gonna do? Your game is over. Period.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do, but except for avoiding that type of situation.
And that's why I think many DMs don't do single point of failures, but they understand single point of failures wrong. Single point of failure is a point where when that point fails, the game is over. You have to stop playing. And if the DM says, no, I can still stop playing, then that's not a single point of failure, my friend. Single point of failure by definition means a point after that when you fail, there is no going forward anymore.
Yeah.
And if your players fail at something and you say, well, I can turn where they can still try some other thing, that's not a single point of failure anymore. Single point means one point of failure. And if that failure comes, the game is over.
I mean, you can have single points which are failures.
Yeah.
But don't have to be, or shouldn't be, the single point of failure. I think there needs to be a distinction between those two. Having 1 point that can fail or 1 point when it fails everything. It's a huge different, it's a completely different thing, but it needs to be addressed in this,
For example,
scenario.
Every dice roll can fail.
Yeah.
Right? For me, every dice roll can fail, every dice roll can succeed. And I totally understand that, for example, you can argue, well, yeah, if my players fail this dice roll, the combat is over because the last player is standing and it's one hit, the monster's one hit and he doesn't hit, the monster hits him and he's dead now. Yeah, but still, that's not a single point of failure. It's really just talking about the problem of the game being derailed by the most atomic of instances, and their players having no option to avoid that. Most combats can be avoided, right? Dice rolls happen. But if a certain decision for, like, single point of failures with dice rolls is always a certain thing, because in D&D, right, there's a binary pass-fail. Every dice roll can fail. Every dice roll could be a single point of failure, because every dice roll could maybe end the campaign in some way, right? There are these possibilities. It's not, in my opinion, a very good thing, but but when we're talking about decisions, if one decision can end the whole campaign in one go, that's something that I, as a player, would not enjoy.
Yeah, what I do sometimes in these situations where a decision is really important, I try to give the option for different decisions beforehand, so there isn't a single point which it all depends on. But if they take a specific path, following this specific path with decisions leading up to it, this would then be a point of failure, but not a single point, because there is a path leading up to it with multiple options to steer away from it. So basically putting a dead end somewhere on any branch of the tree is acceptable.
Yeah.
But not forcing everything to go to that decision that leads to the dead end is an important thing to do. You can't force the decision of the single point of failure on the players. You have to give them options to get to that point, but also multiple options to avoid it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly bringing it to the point what's actually meant with this. You can have single point of failures, but they should be avoidable.
Yeah.
Combats, okay, that's perfect. Then we can say combats are single point of failures, or dice rolls in combats can be single point of failures. But if that dice roll is unavoidable, then you basically break the whole campaign over a single dice roll.
Yeah.
And I have not found a person in my life that finds that fun.
Definitely not.
Like we said in our pre-show, a combat with the BBEG, the last session, right? If basically everything is ending, right? If the campaign is at an end, and you say this is the last combat of the campaign, this is the last moments of these campaigns, yeah, okay. But then also the ending was planned. Then you expect that there can be a single point of failure that derails the whole campaign.
Or if you are at this point, even if it's just a decision and not a combat, for example. If you say this is if you boil it down to the last decision of the campaign, you put an end on either decision tree further on. There is a hard stop after that decision, not mattering in which way. It can lead to success or failure, but it is ending anyways.
Yeah.
So then it isn't a problem if it is a forced decision, because it is ending anyways. If it wouldn't end otherwise, don't force the decision.
Yeah, that's what we talked about with Hamilton in the ending episode 16, which people should listen to with Hamilton, where we basically said, the thing is, if everyone is more or less fine with the campaign ending at that moment, that's a good ending. And then it's okay to have that single point of failure and, right, the campaign ending. Because, like, you, as a DM, you shouldn't put your players into a position where they can basically end the campaign if they are not really wanting to end the campaign, right? Some campaigns end because whatever, but, right, normally, when you want to finish a campaign, the campaign should be finished when everyone is agreeing that the campaign should end. When everyone's agreeing, now this is the end. And most of the time, players are completely fine with the DM finding, okay, well, this is the BBEG, you saved the world, we can end here. Most players say, okay, well, that's perfect. Now we can go new characters, new campaign, new world, whatever. But, right, it's not a discussion you need to have, really.
No, it builds up through play.
At some point, it feels right to just end, and everyone agrees that it should be ending. But if you end the campaign and your players say, well, that's it, I thought we would play next week again or something, well, that could be a bigger problem.
Yeah, but in most cases, I think the end of a campaign is felt by the players, because you get to a point where everything, if you have a convoluted storyline for the player or for the characters that they have to connect, at some point they just connect naturally and they just think, okay, we just put all of this together and we have found out who is behind everything. This is our objective to stop this. And then most of the players, I would say 98% of the players would guess, okay, this is now our last arc. It all led up to this point. This is our making point for our characters, if they succeed on their task or if they don't. But this point in the campaign is the end, regardless of which outcome is presented. It is felt by the players in 98% of the time that it is nearing a specific ending point.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. And I wanted to circle back to, for example, sessions for, okay, let's talk about fudging dice.
Oh, okay.
Because when you, like, is fudging dice a failure on DM part, in your opinion?
No.
No. Do you fudge dice?
Sometimes. It depends on the situation.
Uh-huh.
If I read the room correctly, it's just an assumption. But if I read the room correctly, and I only do it in combat, I don't fudge roleplay dice usually. If there are some roleplay rolls. But if I feel that something, or if that dice would come through like this, it would kill the fun for everyone at the table, I fudge it. But if it doesn't feel that way, I don't.
Okay.
It doesn't happen often. But for example, especially at low-level campaigns, if the monster just in the first round gets a crit and would instantly kill a player in the first 5 minutes of a game, that's something, I don't like this really much. There's still a possibility that they are killed. I am not saying there shouldn't be one, but not just one hit, done, get a new character. That's something unfair for everyone.
Especially a lot of people in online Discord always go the extremes. Oh, you fudge dice so your players can't die in combat, right? No, that's not what Niels just said. That's not what people mean, right? Don't go into these absolutes. Fudging dice is a tool a DM can use not to railroad their players, not to decide the outcome of something, just to preserve the fun.
Exactly.
And I think it's the thing. Yes, I agree that there are way other tools for people to preserve that fun. But the thing is, I won't fault a DM if they make a decision as to preserve the fun of the game.
Yeah, I think especially with fudging, the earlier the campaign is taking place, level-wise, in D&D, for example, the more acceptable it is in regard to... Because in the later stages, they have options to bring dead characters back. Level 2 characters don't have that.
Well, the thing is, for me, right, I talked about this when I was a guest on Thinking Critically, D&D, about failure. That's where we also talked about fudging. That's why I wanted to bring this up as our last point again. Dan doesn't fudge dice. I don't fudge dice, really, because the dice fall as they may. That's an important part. And Dan said something very interesting, and I agree with that. And we talked about it a bit in the episode that, well, the thing is, if you fudge dice, for example, in these lower levels, and I'm not saying you do it wrong because that's your style of play, and I don't even know if your players know that you fudge or not, if they expect it or whatever, right? That's all the thing. That's table to table comparison. Every table is different. Some players might tell the GM, I don't want to die until I'm level 4 or 5, and then the GM has to make sure that the player character doesn't die till that level. And now some people could say, well, there's not a table I would have fun at. Well, then you don't play at that table. Stop arguing over this shit. And what he said is, someone came to him with an example. Well, a dwarven fighter loads his heavy crossbow and shoots at one of my players. He crits and the player would die instantly. Should I fudge that die? And Dan said no, because basically you made so many decisions for that to happen that you could change before that.
Yeah.
The dice fudging is the last resort you have. That's what I say about dice fudging. If it's my last resort to make the game not suck for my players, and I know it would suck for them if this happened, then yes, I have the option to fudge. I don't fudge my dice though, because I think about the implications of certain decisions I make. The first decision you have when you walk back from that, right? You had that dwarf shooting a crossbow bolt at that player character, critting. First of all, theoretically, you made the decision to roll the dice.
Yeah.
That's the last decision you made before the 20. Just don't roll the dice. Just say he hits or he doesn't. That's theoretically something you can do as a DM. Theoretically, you could say just he rolls in, like, I know people that have had combats where they just don't roll the dice for the monster and just say the monster has, like, do what you want. That's theoretically the decision you could say you don't take. You can just say he hits. You don't fudge the dice, you just say he hits. That's also some kind of cheating, you could say, because you should roll the dice. Yes, okay. Let's go one decision back. He shoots that player character. Normally, you are not alone in D&D. You have normally 3 other players. By default definition, D&D is supposed to be played by 4 players with 1 DM. That's the normal party. Why do you shoot that character? That's a decision you can change before rolling the dice and having to fudge. Why do you even have that dwarf in the combat? Why do you even, right? Now we're talking about balancing the encounter, right? If you don't want this combat to be deadly to your players, don't make it a deadly encounter where these NPCs can with 1 crit kill your characters. Don't do that then. Make it so that even if they crit, that player character does not die. And then you need to do the math of what's the highest damage each single creature I throw at my players can do. And now look at the weakest character. Let's say we have a wizard. You have a wizard with a +0 to con, level 1, they have 6 HP. So you should never throw a monster at them that needs more than 12 damage per crit.
Yeah.
Boom. You don't have to fudge the dice so the character doesn't die. Because then they are on death saves. And then others need to help that character. Or he needs to succeed on the death saves. So you have so many decisions to make before fudging dice that you should never need to fudge dice. But if you think you need to fudge dice because you didn't think this through enough, don't be persuaded into thinking that it's not an option you have. Yes, people don't like it. Yes, people don't do it, and you shouldn't as well, right? I'm not really mocking the people that actually talk about it in this way. Let people do what the fuck they want. I let you say you don't fudge dice, so why do you get to tell me that people are not allowed to fudge dice? You are not the RPG police. You don't do it, and you have your right to tell why someone else shouldn't do it, but they have the decision to make for themselves, and you can't judge them for it. But I will say, before you come into the position of fudging dice, you have a lot of decisions to make that could prevent you from ever fudging dice, because I believe fudging dice is not the best tool to use, but it's an acceptable tool to use. I won't have a problem if I find out my DM fudges dice without me knowing before, right? I don't have a problem with that. I want to have fun at the table, and they still have fun if they fudge. That's not an issue for me, but really,
like you said, I see it as it's not something I would do regularly, because it isn't. If you roll a dice, you roll the dice, and then this thing happens, whatever it is. Usually it is something that, like you said, I would use as a last resort. If I made the decisions that led to this point, blah blah blah, and up to this point everything went fine, everyone had fun, but suddenly something happened. It doesn't have to be game related. Something out of game might happen that upsets the player if something else happens to the character. It can happen. And in these situations where it just would kill the fun for everyone, this is then the last resort move I would pull. And I think especially this happened to me in the beginning of my DM career, when everybody is not really experienced in how to balance things, to expect what to... Then it is even more acceptable, I think. Because you need to get some sort of experience. And I started by running pre-written modules. And some of the pre-written modules are just insanely weirdly balanced, especially for level 1 characters. This might be difficult. And when I started, I usually ran those modules. And then because I was inexperienced and didn't know how to rebalance the encounters, I fudged some dice. But the more experience you gain, the less dice fudging you do and is needed. To ensure that everyone has fun. And the more experienced your players get, the less frustrating it is for the player if their character dies in one blow.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
That's basically my statement on fudging dice. The less experienced you are, the more you do it, and the more experienced everyone
the more
gets.
you are persuaded yourself to do it, right? You maybe not even do it because you know you don't want to do it, but there will probably arise way more opportunities for you to do it than when you are very experienced and know how to prevent this last resort that I keep open to myself but haven't used in like 2 years.
Exactly. I had fudged a dice roll pretty recently, like I think 2 or 3 months ago, when I started with a group of completely newbies. 7 players, nobody has played before. And if that attack, because the monster had a multi-attack at level 1, the first attack hit, it was all fine, and the second was a crit. I rolled. And this would have killed this character instantly in the first 2 hours of ever playing D&D. And I think that I thought this would this might kill the fun, not just for him, but for the group, and discourage him to play again.
Yeah.
So then I said, okay, he doesn't crit. You fall unconscious, but you don't die. Done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just as an explanation, the last time I used it, this was really just the last time I fudged dice, or the most recent one, and then before that, I think 1 or 2 years, or even longer before that.
Yeah. If you fudge dice, that's a unique situation you are in, and you can't quantify when you are allowed to fudge dice and when you're not. When you feel like you should do it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Don't beat yourself up about having fudge dice. Don't beat yourself up about if you haven't done it in that situation. It just it's a thought that comes into your head, and if you succumb to it, that's okay.
Don't beat yourself up about it.
I don't care about it. And those people that do care are the people that you shouldn't care about.
Exactly. Yeah, I think. Do you have anything else or any other risky question you want to throw at me?
Well, we could go into other discussions, but no, I don't think we have something that relates to failure again. So, to summarize, one quick thing before that, go check out Thinking Critically's episode on failure. It will be linked in the description below. I was on there and talked with Dan, and we've had some very interesting things and a lot of things we didn't touch on here, but we also have things here that we didn't touch on there. And you can listen to both episodes and really get immersed into what it means to fail and what it means to work with failure and all that stuff. And yeah, we talked about what failure actually means, what it means to fail as a player, what it means to fail as a character, what it means to deal with that failure and the outcomes of that failure. And we talked about fudging dice, one of my favorite discussions ever, why you should do it, why you shouldn't do it, what we do about it, and why fudging dice is not a failure.
Nice.
That's what I wanted to say.
Nice.
That's something very important. Fudging dice is not a failure on your part, even if people tell you so.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you failed? Then you can think about it. If someone else tells you that and you think nope, then it's not a failure. Don't be discouraged. Do what you want.
Exactly. And with that, thank you all for listening. Hear you on the next one, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.